So today we're going to see just how HIFIMAN is going to dominate not just the flagship market with their excellent headphones, but also the mid-range market with their new DAC amp. This is the HIFIMAN EF500. And don't be fooled by the name, although it is a 500 DAC/headphone amplifier, it is actually below the EF400 in terms of quality and intended price point. It looks and feels like HIFIMAN decided to make R2R available to everyone, and EF500 is part of that pledge because it is priced at $459 US, which is much lower than the original pricing of the EF400 and higher than the EF499. So what does the 500 do? First off, it has this beautiful silver face. It has a very satisfying to turn volume wheel, and it also has a selector between os and nos and high gain and low gain. As you can see, this is a vertical DAC amp. It is supposed to sit like this, and you can even use the EF500 as a headphone stand. It doesn't really force the headphones to sit too open, so it will not reduce the clamping force after a long period of usage. And at the back we have the inputs and the outputs. At the back we have the kettle plug power input, we have a fuse, and we have the on-off switch. Just like the EF499, there is no way to turn off the EF500 outside of using the switch at the back. We have a input selector between the coaxial or the Ethernet plus USB, so the two have a different controller. And we have the Ethernet input. You can stream with the EF499. Tidal and Spotify will see it as Tidal Direct. So basically, as long as it is in the same network as your smartphone on the same Wi-Fi, you should be able to select the EF500 as the output. We also have both the Type-C and the Type-B USB input, which is super nice because, I use Type-C more. I just have a lot of cables on my desk and it's convenient, although most audiophile cables are still made for the Type B standard. The coaxial input is just coaxial, is the traditional stuff, and we also have a line out both in RCA and XLR balanced. I personally prefer using the XLR balanced whenever possible because it has a lower background noise, but that's just because the cables are better grounded. Usually it's a design part for the cables and I have a lot of electronic interference across the room, but in theory they should both be okay. At the front we have two headphone outputs, and this is my only gripe with the F500. We have an XLR balanced headphone output and a 6.3mm single-ended headphone output. The only thing which I feel is missing is the 4.4mm balanced headphone output. I'm saying it is missing because it does have the XLR headphone output, so you can just use an adapter like the Hi-Fi XLR 44B, so you won't have to worry about using it with balanced headphones. In fact, this is the interesting part about the F500. I was able to power even IMs with it, and I'm talking about very sensitive IMs like Campfire Bonneville. I heard zero background noise, which is incredible considering that the F400 was quite noisy when used with DMs. And this is where I was going with the idea that HIFIMAN plans to dominate the mid-range market, because offering the F500 at such an affordable price point, but having it with zero background noise, controlling EMs, and having a huge headroom for hard-to-drive headphones makes it one of the safest purchases for someone who has both IMs and headphones. In fact, I would have a hard time telling you that there is a single headphone it cannot drive. It can drive HIFIMAN HA1000 Special Edition, it can drive Palma DHS1, it can drive Dan Clark Audio Expanse, T plus A Solitaire PSA. Basically every single headphone I have around the house is just fine with the F500, and it has a beautiful sound. I think this covers most of the build. So the sound of the F500 is best if used in NOS mode. This time around we are going with the full R2R DAC. It just sounds a bit better than the F499. It's more refined and it is not quite that soft. While with the F499 I did complain that I don't feel that much difference between OS and NOS. With the F500 it's obvious. As soon as you turn this selector to OS or NOS, you will hear that the NOS mode is much more gentle, more refined and silkier. You will hear a much warmer bass, warmer lower mid-range, and a much more relaxed sound. Just like R2R is supposed to sound, you'll hear a much softer and not quite as edgy texture. Usually this is really audible with scenes, for example, where the OS mode will sound quite edgy, it will be a bit fatiguing, where the NOS mode will sound really soft, gentle and refined. The difference is quite huge with the F500, it's like going between two extremely different DACs, because the treble is also affected. When using the NOS mode, you will hear a very gentle rolled off and silky treble, while in OS or oversampled mode, which is more similar to Delta Sigma, you will hear a very harsh, a very sharp, bright, and even slightly harsh treble. So I avoided using the OS mode because it's a bit too extreme for my liking. I prefer the NOS mode quite a bit better. Also, the bass is more neutral in the OS mode. This is not a rule. Every single DAC reacts differently between having oversampling or non-oversampling, but EF500 just sounds so much better in the non-oversampled mode, which is the pure R2R mode. We think about the NOS mode as the pure R2R, and OS is like an R2R DAC which is phased through a filter that makes it more like a Delta Sigma DAC. The soundstage expands beautifully in the lateral dimension, so you get a very good projection laterally. Although the depth of the soundstage is presented in two layers mainly. You have a foreground layer, which is the lead voice and the lead instrument, and the background layer, which is more expanded both laterally and also pushed back. There is no middle layer in general. Most music is presented like this. You get the feeling of a live concert in a very cozy room. This is how I describe the sound of the F500, but it does very good with handling very busy tracks or music which is just generally compressed. For example, Metallica tracks, everything that's metal, rock, and pop will sound just colorful and vivid out of the F500. It also handles classical very well, but almost everything handles classical well. I have not had a single DAC amp which doesn't make classical music sound good. And I had this little revelation a few days ago because my wifey had a few friends who came over and they played the piano. And I noticed that the piano doesn't have good speakers. It has one of the worst speakers ever created. It's an electric piano. But when they started playing, I realized how much I love music. Our brain just interprets music as sweet and pleasing. It's not always about how good the DAC amp is, as long as you listen to mainly one instrument and it's classical. Most of them handle it well. But when you have a complex track with orchestral pieces with many players or rock music, which is extremely compressed, which is extremely loud, then you need something of a higher quality. So this is where EF500 kicks in. You really hear its refinement, its detail and its resolution when the track puts it to the test. So for the headphones, we can clarify from the start that it can drive every single hard-to-drive headphone out there. Like, you won't find a headphone it can't drive, and most of them will be driven really well. But the surprising part is that it drives EMs well. So the only disadvantage is that you don't have a lot of volume control. You go on low gain. You also go on low gain for headphones. But with EMs, you have between 9 o'clock and 12 o'clock. You can't go any higher because at 12 o'clock it reaches about 120 to 130 decibels. It's too loud for me, I wouldn't go any higher, but the control is super nice. There is a very low THD or total harmonic distortion. The sound is crisp, it doesn't really have a strong background noise level, and it just is refined and detailed. You don't hear any kind of issue when driving games, and that's really beautiful. I mean, you can have the EF500 as your only DAC amp and be glad. You don't need anything else. It's superb in its performance. Overall, is it recommended? In the $500 price range, I can't really recommend something better. I don't know of anything which would be better, especially if you want the gentle and refined and smooth and silky R2R sound. EF500 is not to be missed. If you want to help, you can use the purchase links in the video description. Also, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and I thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely and a musical day out there. Bye bye!